rabbits! Welcome to Oh Rabbits, another Doctor Who podcast. I'm Will.
I'm Alex.
I'm Nick.
We're watching Doctor Who from the very beginning and then getting together each week for a chat about it. You'll find us on social media at Oh Rabbits Pod on Instagram, Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm creating artwork for each story as we go, and you'll find that posted in all of those places. This week, we've been watching the second half of the very first story with the Forest of Fear and the Firemaker. So, who wants to start us off?
Go for it.
It's quite a dull opening for episode 3.
I don't know what you're going on about.
I think coming away from the final 2 parts of this story, I really only think there's enough story for one of them between the 2. I think it's quite stretched in places. And there are probably reasons for that and things that we'll come to later. But I think for me, the toughest bit was the first 7 or 8 minutes of episode 3. That was very slow. I don't think I'd ever really clocked this before. It's one of the things, obviously, going through it. There isn't a proper, unless I'm completely barking, like they don't restage the cliffhanger, do they? It just picks up after the cliffhanger.
Yeah, it opens with sort of lengthy dialogue-free interludes of cavemen creeping around.
Yeah, and they've all been locked up. That we don't see all of that, do we? Did I just blank out at the end of last week?
No, I think you're right.
Well, they're put into the Cave of Skulls at the end of last week, aren't they?
Yeah,
but
but
we
you
don't
don't
see it again this week.
No, there's a lot of faith in the viewer, I feel. So you've launched your brand new series, the premise of which is a huge thing in episode 1. Stone me, this everyday ordinary phone box is actually a space-time machine that's in disguise. They've then thrown them to the past of Earth's history, and that's pretty exciting. And they can't quite get back to the ship, but they really want to. And then you've got a third episode, which never once shows this amazing new time spaceship or really explains that these people are time travelers who are stranded here. It's really just relying on you having watched those first 2 episodes. So I think if you joined at episode 3, you would be lost because they don't really explain anything. It's not until the end of part 4 where they're suddenly inside the spaceship. Now there's a phrase to conjure with, but they're inside the spaceship suddenly again. If you haven't seen the first 3 parts, you'd be like, why is there a phone box? Why is it so big? What's going on? It's incredibly reliant upon you having a decent working knowledge of what's come before, which in some ways I think that's probably just how it was at the time because you were conditioned to do TV that way.
I think it's probably like you say, because TV at the time was just different. It was A, probably more like that, and B, because there was just no concept of ever being able to see anything again. People were used to being slightly unsure of what was going on and just picking it up and dropping it again because there was no opportunity. If you miss something, you miss it, and that's it.
Maybe the air of I have no idea what's going on explains what happens in about 9 episodes time when David Whittaker takes the reign of writer. If you could explain Edge of Destruction to me, oh boy, I'm all ears.
I felt these 2 episodes, I love the Hartnell era and I love the vibe of the Hartnell era, but even within the Hartnell era, these are slow. It's like you say, Alex, there's not a great deal of incident.
And it's weird because I still really like them. I think there's a real sense of menace to them, real sense of tension when they're trying to escape in the forest and Barbara has a bit of a sort of breakdown essentially. I think that's quite well done. I do think it's interesting that everyone always kind of points to Susan as being like, the one who screams all the time and Barbara's a bit more level-headed. That's pretty reversed here, really. That said, Susan doesn't get a lot to do. Although my favourite part of Susan, my favourite bit of Susan easily is episode 4, where she picks up the skull and she puts the flame under it. And they do a big thing of her picking up the skull, putting the flame under it, making it sort of glow. And you think, oh, she's come up with a plan. That's how they're going to revolve her now. No, she just shows it to her granddad. Goes, oh, look at this. It's really weird. And then he's the one who goes, hang on a minute. I've got a great plan now. It's like, what is she doing? She's absolutely, she's just in the world of her. She really is an unearthly child, that one.
She is playing the ancient Gallifreyan game of Fire Skull.
Oh, no,
And
well, yeah. I mean, well, sure, canonically, yeah, but we don't want to get into the weeds of this. I think that's also twice I've made a terrible unearthly child joke, so I do apologise. But
What I like, though, I think it was you last week, Alex, that said this script is full of foreshadowing. And it was only on this watch through I realised when they capture the Doctor last week and Cal or Zar or whoever it is brings him back to the tribe, he says he's got fire inside him. He is full of fire, and I've seen it come out of his fingers. And so, of course, they buy that these flaming skulls are these people because they think they're full of fire. And I've
yeah,
never twigged that before.
that's a really good point.
I suddenly went, oh, yeah.
are they being that clever? I don't. Yeah, no, they probably are. No, you're almost certainly right. I just always thought it's a bit of a weird contrivance,
Yeah.
but I do. I know you've got a point, actually. Yeah. No, I'll take that back. You're right. That is quite good. It's quite
That
good.
was always my thing. I always thought it's a really odd thing.
Yeah. I mean,
Mm.
there's much that's really odd. Like when Ian's rubbing the sticks together, and it doesn't look like they're within about 5 inches of touching each other in part four because he's waiting for the flame to start. There's a really weird. I'm sure it's just an angle thing, but one body's rubbing the sticks, and then just before the flame comes about, it's like, are they touching? Because I can't see it.
Oh, I thought because obviously it's old. No matter how tarted up you can make the image, I thought he was using sticks with some sort of twine or string because you can do it like that to get things to move even faster. Imagine two like a bow and arrow or a
Mhm.
bow. Imagine two bows using the strings like that. So, but I think you're probably right.
No, I suspect you're probably right. I've probably just
No,
seen it wrong. But it's whatever else it is. It's at an ambiguous angle, and I stand by
yes.
that.
And can anyone tell me why? And I know health and safety stuff like that is different back then. Why they felt the need to do the fight on film, but all the flame work was fine in the studio.
I think it's just so that they can cut a bit better, tighten it
Oh,
all up.
okay. I mean, the best cut of that whole fight was right at the end when it cuts back to the studio and the camera's almost like a
Mm.
POV of him being dragged
Yes.
behind Star. That's such a nice shot. I thought that was really well done.
It's an odd fight, though, isn't it? Like, not just. I mean, you've always got a sort of disparity in terms of quality and feel when it switches from video to film. Like, the sets never perfectly match up. That's fine. Yeah, even if not visually, in terms of picture quality, just in terms of sets, they're normally not quite one for one. That's okay. You expect it. That said, the cave suddenly looks about 5,000 times larger. And I
It
can see
does.
why they're doing the cutaways to the regulars looking horrified, but it is a bit odd. It just kind of ruins the flow somewhat.
And it does also have my second least favorite fight move from the 60s, which is in any 60s thing, which is when someone puts their foot in someone's stomach and then rolls backwards and throws them over their head. It's such a rubbish move. It's only beaten, which isn't in this fight, by the thing where someone grabs someone's arm and twists it and flips them over. Both of those just look so shonky and 60s world of wrestling. I hate them.
I'm also always really confused by the end of the fight because it looks like he's broken his neck, but then he still seems to be alive. And so just to make sure, he then whacks him with a giant rock. So
Yeah,
is that kind of like the equivalent of like double tap a zombie? Shoot him in the head, then shoot him again just to make sure it really is dead. I can't tell, or is it just is it meant to be winded? I've never really understood the end of that fight.
I suppose if you want to give Anthony Coburn some credit, and it certainly won't be for siring a son, if you want to give him some sort of if you want to give him some sort of credit, if it was like an actual caveman would have no way of telling if someone was alive or dead.
True.
Mm.
So it's perfectly reasonable that you do something to visually show. Not, I don't mean on screen. I mean, if you were a caveman, or if I bash his head with this rock, he definitely will be dead.
And that bit's genuinely quite scary. There's a great
Oh
shot of
yeah.
him holding up the rock, and I'm not particularly prudish about this kind of stuff, but there was a moment when I sort of went, "Blimey, this went out at 5:30."
I think there's a lot of that coming up as well. They're just things,
I
they're just things you wouldn't. I mean, you wouldn't even do sort of like 10 years later, let alone where we are
I
now.
I was shocked at how, because of the black and white, how graphic the scratches and blood on what's his name, Zar,
So,
Zar. That's it.
ah,
After he's been attacked by the animal,
Mm.
um, those scratches that are then down his chest, they're really well done, and they look really good. And I don't know if it's the black and white hiding it, therefore making it look worse than it is. But I was very impressed with that. I liked Derek Newitt in general. I thought he was very
Oh,
good.
he's excellent. Yeah, he is. I
Um,
think it's. I still really enjoyed the 2 episodes. I think you're all both perfectly right. Definitely, it's slow. It definitely runs out of steam. All of that is true, but there's some really nice bits in there, like where they sort of discuss dreams, but they don't know what a dream is. So they give it that sort of poetic description. It's the sort of thing that could be terrible, but just about works here. I really like that she thinks Ian is called friend. I think that's quite a nice little
yes.
character moment. They both play that really well. I also like how selfish they are. He said, once I have fire, you can go, and he's got face up when you can't go, but your tribe's here. What's the problem? I don't understand.
It's that great bit where her comes back in and they're saying, but you said you'd let us go. And she's like, well, we've got fire now. Like, you hold no cards.
Yeah, absolutely. It is some really nice moments in there, definitely. Shall we get on to the Doctor nearly braining a man with a rock?
I was very disappointed. I was promised the Eighth Doctor would show up at that point, having lost his memories, to try and restore them.
BBC books.
I think that Paul McGann has filmed that bit for the Blu-rays. I'm sure someone told me that was happening.
Are we going to get the Master and like the equivalent of like Crime Watch in the Sea Devils as well? Then is this what you're telling me? It's a weird book, isn't it? The Eight. We'll get onto that another day. I'm sure that will come up.
I really like the Doctor picking up the stone and thinking about it, because there's something about it. I love the struggle that's going on among those 4 lead characters, where Barbara's the most human, and it's her compassion that helps save them and then ultimately gets them trapped again. But I also love the Doctor's really alien thing of, in his mind, absolutely, we kill this guy, we're safe. And there's no question. I don't want to say I don't like that no future Doctor would even give it a second thought, because then it's a completely different character. But I really quite like the danger and the detached alien sense at this point, where he's just like, yeah, this is how we get loose.
I may point you towards Shockeye.
I was going to say Colin
yeah.
Baker feels but it's interesting, isn't it? Because when they do it there, it feels oddly gratuitous, and actually, it's actually very true to the character's roots to do that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I think because we've shifted so far away, then suddenly making him so spiky and slightly alien. I mean, it's overdone, I'd argue, in that era, but it's a good moment.
One thing I did want to mention is, and I've never really know, and I don't know if any of us know the depth of it, but does calling companions come from this? Because there is that line, isn't there, where he refers to them as, I can't remember who referred, but they are referred to as companions.
He says to them in the Cave of Skulls, he offers some advice, and Barbara is surprised and sort of says, why are you helping us? And he says, well, fear makes companions of us all.
Like, is that where it comes from? Is that why we call them companions?
Could be. I know it's a misunderstanding of the term assistant and terror of the Autons. I made everyone call them assistants for years. Joe Grant is very literally his assistant, as in a scientific laboratory sense, the same way Liz Shaw was. And this seems to have been slightly, slightly misinterpreted for a long, long time. I prefer it to friend.
I don't know. I quite like friend of the Doctor. That sounds like a euphemism for something.
It certainly sounds like some sort of group that you see, and you're like, "Oh, that's nice. He's a friend of the Doctor," But I'm very supportive of that. It's okay, I've marched.
I did quite like, because people talk a lot about that. Fear makes companions of us all, and is it Listen? There's somewhere in series 8, Clara goes back and sees the Doctor as a child and tells him that line.
Oh, spoilers!
So that's where he's got it from. But the bit I never see talked about is that he does the whole, fear makes companions of us all. And then he says, and so does that other feeling that goes along with it, hope. And I quite like that. That's a really nice message. And I think that bit always gets cut off.
I think the hope thing almost feels like something you would get from later versions of the Doctor. That feels like a revisionist look that was actually there from, like you say, from that early on.
Yeah, 3 weeks in, and he's already, the tone of this series and this character is broadly hopeful.
Yeah.
It does kind of stand out, because it's then contradicts pretty much everything that comes in the next 2 episodes. I tell you what's quite nice is where they're running out for the forest. Barbara trips over. The doctor runs over her, but then so does Susan. They both just ignore that Barbara's there and
Yeah.
thrown on the floor. And again, it does kind of remind you that neither of them are human. Oh, and just to be really irritating, I'd just like to point out that the line is actually "Fear makes companions of all of us," which is, I'm just going to say it because it is misquoted all the time. And as you were saying, I was like, no, it's not that, because it stood out to me because I was watching it and he said the line. I went, that's not what the line is. That's wrong.
Yes, but if we quote the line properly, then Steph Coburn will come round and club us all to death.
Oh, that's true. If you say Steph 3 times in a mirror, you get sued. It's great. And then you're not allowed to put your podcast on iPlayer. That's how it works.
I feel like
Hello, Alan.
yeah, yes. Alan Bromley, the cat, not the Doctor Who director, has just joined me in the living room. He also watched these 2 episodes with me, but has been quite evasive on his thoughts. What did you think of the episodes? Did you like them, Alan? I think that's conclusive.
He was always more of an Eccleston man, wasn't he?
He was. I find Alan Bromley, again, the cat, not the director, he's a big fan of most Doctors, can't stick the Tom Baker run. No, I feel like the script on this one, considering it, well, I don't think we know exactly when it was commissioned, but there's a point where on one week, Sidney Newman rejects the original first story. And by the end of the following week, we at least have the first episode of this one written. And within about another fortnight, all 4 are written. It feels like this is a script that's so carefully thought through and plotted, all the foreshadowing, all the references, all the like contrast between there's the fight going on in the tribe for leadership. That same fight is playing out in miniature in the TARDIS crew. There's a bit where Ian speaks for the group and the Doctor is really pissed off. And he says to Ian something like, oh, you've elected yourself leader, have you? And, blah, blah, blah. And it feels like this is, perhaps more than any other Doctor Who script, one that I could see you studying in an English literature class, because it feels denser and more carefully written than a lot of the stuff you might expect from 60s Doctor Who.
Because then you do get the payoff to that of Ian saying that the Doctor is the tribe's leader.
Yeah.
Like in episode 4. So it has thematic through points that I think work really well.
I think it's going to be interesting when we do the next couple of stories to note the journey of the Doctor's character and how unbelievably inconsistent it is. Because if you think it's wobbling now, strap in, lads. There's this whole thing about, isn't there, the sort of fan theory about, it's a Marco Polo, he really mellows because it takes so long and all this. Wait until we watch The Dead Planet next week. He's written entirely differently to how he is. He's jolly, he's cracking jokes, they're all having a jolly old time. And it's really weird. It just feels sort of very, very inconsistent at this time. And then you get to Inside the Spaceship and he's an absolute tosser again. Marco Polo is probably where it settles down. But I don't buy this idea that's when he mellows out. I'm pretty sure he's pretty mellow next week. I think that's just an inconsistency in writing.
I suppose it also comes down ever so slightly to that thing of, are people really going to notice those inconsistencies week to week?
No, we notice it because we've rewatched it 100 times. But it wasn't meant to be. It was an ephemeral thing that went out once, and that was pretty much it, unless you were very lucky and maybe got a repeat. Which,
You won't now.
No. Copywriters put pay to that.
I've only got there's I think 2 more things I wanted to say. One is the effects in the Forest of Fear are slight. It's basically the 4 regulars being whacked in the face by branches, but it really works. I really like it.
So I do as well. And this is to my shame because this sort of more comes up next week. There's a shot where like Carol Ann Ford is running on the spot. Someone's twatting her with a branch. And there's a sort of curtain of trees that's going on a circle. And genuinely, when I was about 10 or 11 watching it, 11 or 12, I couldn't work out how they did that. I was like, oh my God, that's so different. It's so clever. The thing is running by. I remember even like a couple of years later watching it going, oh, Nick, it's very obvious how they do that. I think even I realised they're running the spot and just like occasionally someone would put a twig in Hartnell's face. Doesn't Hartnell look really peeved as well when they're doing it. Everyone else is kind of like, oh, act a bit sweaty. He just looks like, no, this is not what I signed up for. It feels he's already thinking, when can I contractually get out of this? It's not looking good.
It's fine. It'll only run for 4 weeks.
Here's the thing about Hartnell. People often, I think, sometimes wrongly sort of say, he stumbles on his lines, he's not very good, all this, that, the other. I think there are definitely examples where he's not having a great day. Some of it is performance. Sometimes it isn't. That's fine. There are gradients to it. He is struggling slightly, I felt, in episode 3 of this. I think he fumbles more than anyone else with some of the lines. He feels a lot shakier than the other regulars do. That said, it's just what happens. It's just, there's worst examples that come from other shows of other people doing these things. I mean, I hate that cliche about wobbly sets. It's like, have they ever seen 40 Towers? Half of the sets wobble, and so do the actors. It's everything's kind of all over the place. But Hartnell's definitely having a comparative mare, I feel, in episode 3 of this. I wonder if that is an early sign of giving him a lot to do is maybe not always wisest move. Again, just because it's a lot to learn very quickly under quite strenuous conditions.
Obviously, his main background is, at this point, apart from movies, he does dramatic stuff. But his main background in television is the Army game. So it's very sitcom. It's very one set, walk in, do your lines, be in charge, walk out again. It's probably more action than he's ever dealt with on such a quick time scale in a TV studio.
And I think he does well. He recovers well. He gets the meaning of it. He comes back. I'm certainly not being disparaging of his performance. I think he was in a really good performance across these 4 episodes. I just thought it was notable, partly because of how good he is in those first 2 episodes. As we discussed last week, part of that is because episode 1 is a second shot. Episode 2, you probably got a bit of a kick in the arm because of that. I'm sure that they had a lot of refinement of stuff in there, knowing what's sort of coming up. It just stood out to me a little bit in a way that I wasn't expecting so early on. I wonder if it's a pressure thing, perhaps.
I do have a random question.
The answer is twice, but never again.
I think that seems fairly reasonable. Bearing in mind we've made light of the issues with it, what is the future for these 4 episodes? What does it hold? What happens to this when the Blu-rays come out? What happens in 20 years' time on another streaming service? Are these just gone forever? Apart from obviously DVDs.
Well, someone has pointed out that under British copyright law, the 4 episodes of An Unearthly Child will become public domain on the 1st of January 2048. So worst comes to worst, 24 years from now, it's there.
Yeah.
I think in the short term, I don't think it's going to show up on iPlayer anytime soon. I don't know what the legalities are on the Blu-ray, but it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't there.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's conspicuous by its absence when it comes to Blu-ray. It would be a shame, not only just being the first 4, but first 4 that actually exist. But no, I don't think it'll be there.
Then when you do the Blu-ray box set, do you leave a tray to put your DVD in?
Oh, see, that's a good one. Because in my head I go yes, but then equally will people then go, oh, there's a disc missing?
Yeah, I think they will.
I think you run the risk, don't you?
Unless it comes with like a little paper disc that's in there going, place your copy of An Unearthly Child here.
I like the optimism. I don't think it's going to happen, no.
I'll tell you what, it's amazing how quickly you adapt to. I found it really annoying having to put the DVD in for this one because I'm so used to if I want to watch a bit of Classic Who, I can just call it up on iPlayer now or BritBox before or whatever. And it's felt like a proper chore to go, oh, I'm going to have to go sit in the other room.
I think I watch quite a lot of physical media still. I'm one of those people who's got the 4K TV and 4K Blu-rays or whatever. There's a lot of classic TV in inverted commas. I mean, can you really call the adventure game classic? I don't know, but I've been watching that on DVD because a lot of that isn't sort of accessible to stream or what have you. So yeah, I don't know. It's sort of less of a leap for me, but I know what you mean. I have a bit of that with computer gaming, where a lot of my games I have on my Nintendo Switch is digital. So when I had to put a physical cartridge in, there is a sense of like, oh yeah, this is a thing, isn't it?
There's definitely a swing back towards physical media.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Fundamentally, there is.
I think the more things get removed off streaming services, the more people realise, oh gosh, that's gone forever. I mean, you can't watch, like say, the Mysterious Benedict Society is nowhere to be found on Disney Plus. So where do you watch that now? It's gone. It was there. It's not anymore. Willow, and I think people are waking up to that maybe slightly more.
Next time.
Hello, is it me you're looking for? The ratings department says yes. It's episodes 1 and 2 of The Daleks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.